sheets at the back of the church on Sunday, but I failed to mention that I have them back there. Did you get one? No, that's last week. But we're going to be talking this next 2 weeks about Moses. So it's going to be like starts in Exodus. There's not a Moses book. It would be a whole lot easier. So we're going to be talking tonight just about some of the things in his life, and then next week we're going to be thinking about lessons that we can be taught through the life of Moses. So before we get started, tell me something you know about Moses.
Burning bush.
Burning bush. I've got a kid Bible in there. I got one that was like 10 years old. It's got this picture of him taking off his shoes in front of the burning bush. What else?
Was he the one that was put in the bulrushes?
It started out as a basket case. What else?
Is he the one who killed somebody and then he couldn't go in the promised land? No.
No, because he killed somebody.
Oh, but
He
he
did
didn't kill
something
some.
else.
Did he kill somebody?
No.
Oh, rats.
No, he there were some people he probably wanted to through that 40 years of wandering.
Did he kick a rock or something like that to get water?
He did it twice.
Yeah.
Twice.
And he led them through the parting of the Red Sea.
And he brought what down from the mountain?
Ten
The Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments. It's really funny to think about that movie, about his life and about the children, the old movie. And I remember thinking him coming down with these big tablets, you know, and then he got mad and busted them up and had to go back and get some more. I love the fact some of these Bible characters had tempers like the rest of us. What else? Well, we're going to be finding out tonight, next week, that Moses had an interesting life. He spent the first 40 years thinking he was somebody, because he was raised in the household of the Pharaoh, and he was really high in that level. And then he spent 40 years being a nobody, just kind of wandering around, trying to figure out what he was going to do with his life, who he was going to be married to. And then he spent 40 years being God's somebody when he was going through the desert with the people. First time I heard a preacher tell me that a long time ago, and so that's what reminded me of Moses. And he said, well, I'm not going to live to be 120, and this is what Moses did. But there's some things about Moses' life that we'll look at tonight, and some things we'll talk about next week. He's not that sweet little character you think of when you think about your Sunday school pictures. Did anybody go to Sunday school where they had those big pictures? Oh. Yeah. And there's a lot to him, and there's a lot that was really good, and there was some that wasn't very good. So, let's hand these out. Should have gotten them to you on Sunday, but I didn't. Take one and pass it around, please. Some of the steps through his life that we're going to look at. And as you're looking, hearing about this tonight, be thinking this next week about what lessons you can learn from Moses' life. And that's what we'll be talking about next week. Exodus, easy, that's the second book in the Bible. They used to think that Moses wrote Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, which would have been a neat trick because he was dead at the end of Deuteronomy. But he and the Jewish thought they kind of lumped them all as the books of Moses. So we start off with this story in Exodus chapter 2, verses 1 to 10. We're going to find out something from which he was delivered. Anybody like to read some of that? Just stop when you're tired of reading. A man from the family of Levi married a Levite woman. The woman became pregnant and had a son. She saw there was something special about him and hid him. She hid him for 3 months. When she couldn't hide him any longer, she got a little basket boat made of papyrus, waterproofed it with tar and pitch, and placed the child in it. Then she set it afloat in the reeds at the edge of the Nile. Now, do you know why she only kept him 3 months and then put him out in the river?
Pharaoh's edict. Pharaoh's edict.
Yeah, Pharaoh got concerned because the Hebrew children were getting to be so numerous, outnumbering them, And so he put out an edict, and it's really cool because the midwives in the Jewish community were supposed to kill any baby boys that they delivered. Well, they would tell the Pharaoh, you know, these Jewish women, they just drop those babies so quick we can't get to them. And so Moses was one of the ones that had been saved, but then he was getting old enough they would be able to see that he was a little boy, so she sends him down the river. The baby's older sister found herself a vantage point a little way off and watched to see what would happen to him. Pharaoh's daughter came down to the Nile to bathe. Her maidens strolled on the bank. She saw the basket floating in the reeds and sent her maid to get it. She opened it and saw the child, a baby, crying. Her heart went out to him. She said, this must be one of the Hebrew babies. Then his sister was before her. Do you want me to go and get a nursing mother for you from the Hebrews so that she can nurse the baby for you? Pharaoh's daughter said, yes, go. The baby went and called the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter told her, take this baby and nurse him for me. I'll pay you. The woman took the child and nursed him. After the child was weaned, she presented him to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her son. She named him Moses, meaning pulled out, and saying, I pulled him out of the water. So what was the first thing he was delivered from?
Death.
Death, yeah. Being killed. I wish I had some idea. I wish they gave the story a little more detail to know how long he floated in that little boat before somebody found him. And I love the idea of Miriam kind of going along the edge, making sure he's okay. I think about what kind of critters might have been in that river and things like that, but he was okay from that. Verses 11 to 14, he has to make a decision about something. I think you're right, Jean, I was wrong. I was thinking about something else. One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Glancing this way and that, seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. The next day he went out and saw two Hebrews fighting. He asked the one in the wrong, why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew? The man said, who made you ruler and judge? Are you thinking of killing me like you killed the Egyptian? Then Moses was afraid and thought, what I did must become known. So he's got to make a decision now. What's his decision about? To stay or run. To stay or run. You know, it's one thing when you do something, it's another thing when it gets seen and it comes back at you later. Verse 15, when Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. So he's taken off to go to, departed from Egypt and took off to Midian. There's a really interesting thing coming up in these next few verses that I had never really thought about. Chapter 3, verses 1 to 6. Before we get there, I've got to finish up the story a little bit. If you remember the movie, he sees this woman shepherding the flock. I realized when I was looking at the scripture for around Christmas, any of the shepherds, pretty much except for David, mentioned in the Bible are always female shepherds. When Jacob went to find a wife, he found his wife being a shepherd. I don't know why we never had girl shepherds in the Christmas play then. So he helps her out, and her name is Zipporah, and she's given in marriage. And what a lot of people don't realize is Zipporah was from, Midian was in one of the more African areas of Egypt. And it's generally thought that Zipporah was a black woman. You don't see that talked about very much. You sure don't see it in the pictures because of the way many things were portrayed over the years. But he helps her out, and her dad just takes him in, gets him going. Chapter 3, Moses and the burning bush. Would someone please read 3, 1 to 6?
Moses was shepherding the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. He led the flock to the west end of the wilderness and came to the mountain of God, Horeb. The angel of God appeared to him in flames and in fire blazing out of the middle of a bush. He looked, the bush was blazing away, but it didn't burn up. Moses said, "What's going on here? I can't believe that. Amazing. Why doesn't the bush burn up? How far did you tell me to go?
6.
Oh, 6. God saw that he had stopped to look. God called him to him from out of the bush. Moses, Moses. He said, yes, I'm right here. God said, don't come any closer. Remove your sandals from your feet. You're standing on holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Moses hid his face, afraid to look at God.
Think about it. You're out in this fairly mountainous area, shepherding flocks. And you look over and you see something. And you go to look and you see that it was not just a burning bush. I mean, we all see forest fires pictures. What was different about this burning bush?
It wasn't burning up.
It wasn't burning up. It wasn't burning up. That alone would be enough to scare most of us. But then the bush begins to talk. So like something you see at Disneyland, you know. And it's interesting to me that Moses heard his name called. You know, he heard his name called. It wasn't just something he saw and moved on from. God evidently knew him, had him picked out, called him by name. If you've ever had God really laid on your heart to do something, especially if God uses your own name in it, that's pretty scary, I think. It's the right thing to do, but it's scary. And so this bush, and then the bush, or God in the bush, identifies himself by telling him the things that he would know. Now, the interesting thing to me is Moses had been raised in the Pharaoh's house. So how did he know all this Hebrew stuff? How did he know who these folks were? How did he know who Isaac and Jacob were? How did he know who Abraham was? How would he know that if he was raised in an Egyptian household?
Because after he left Egypt, he was living in Midian, and from what I understand, those people, if they weren't descended from Isaac, they were at least descended from Ishmael, so they would have known.
So he may have learned some of that through his father-in-law, they said was a priest. What other way could he have heard these names before?
Through the woman that was his mother who nursed him.
Through his mother who nursed him. You know, there's a lot of things we learn before we're 3 and 4 years old that we don't even remember that that's where we learned them. So even could have been that far back. And then verse 11, start at verse 9. God talking about them. The Israelite cry for help has come to me, and I've seen for myself how cruelly they're being treated by the Egyptians. It's time for you to go back. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the people of Israel, out of Egypt. Moses answered, but why me? How many times have we all asked that sometime? Why me? Why should I go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? So Moses is concerned here about? He's concerned about himself, why he has to do this. Why would Moses be worried about going back to Egypt?
Because he had killed that
Because he had killed a man, even though it was a slave, and even though Pharaoh had been very upset with him, he would have been put himself in danger to go back. We kind of skip over that sometimes. We just know we'll find out later a lot of things he's concerned about. Verse 13. This is Moses trying to bargain with God. I don't know, we never do this. Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to them. And they ask, what is his name? What shall I tell them? So the next thing he's concerned about, how they will know he's from God. How he will know, how they'll know that that's who. Maybe Moses just coming back trying to stir up trouble and get Pharaoh overthrown. Because we get the idea at this point there were a lot of Israelites there in Egypt. Skipping on down to chapter 4, verse 1. What if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, the Lord did not appear to you? Again, this crisis of being accepted for what he is and what he's doing. I love how God continues with him in this chapter. The Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? A staff. The Lord said, throw it on the ground. He threw it on the ground and it became a snake. Now remember that because you're going to see that happen again. I love when you see some of these shows and they try to explain all this. If you ever watch any of those on the History Channel, try to tell you how that happened and what it could have been. It doesn't bother my faith to watch those things. I think it's kind of fascinating sometimes. All I know is this is what's written, and we go from there. And then God says, put your hand inside the shirt, verse 6. He slipped his hand in his shirt, took it out, and his hand had turned leprous. Now, you've known enough to know that to be declared leprous was just a living death sentence. And you couldn't go anywhere, you couldn't touch anything, you couldn't be around people whatsoever. Put your hand back under your shirt, you didn't, took it back out, healthy as before. I think Moses needed a little extra encouragement about some of this stuff. And then down into verse 10, Moses raised another objection to God. Master, please, I don't talk well. I've never been good with words, neither before nor after you spoke to me. I stutter and stammer. So now he's concerned about talking in front of people. I know that afflicts some of us, talking in front of people. Now, up to this point, we've not been told anything about Moses stuttering or stammering. I wonder how much of that was from pure fright as much as anything else. And once again, God doesn't take that. He says, and who do you think, verse 11, made the human mouth? And who makes some mute and some deaf, some sighted and some blind? Isn't it I, God? So get going. I'll be right there with you, with your mouth. I'll be right there to teach you what to say. He said, oh, Master, please send somebody else. I remember about a year and a half ago, praying often in this building. Lord, please call somebody else. Please call somebody else. Then God got angry. It's never good when God gets angry. Never good. God gets angry with Moses. Don't you have a brother, Aaron the Levite? He's good with words. I know he is. He speaks very well. In fact, at this very moment, he's on his way to meet you. When he sees you, he's going to be glad. You'll speak to him and tell him what to say. I'll be I'll be right here with you as you speak with him and with him as he speaks, teaching you step by step. He'll speak to the people for you. He'll act as your mouth. But you decide what comes out of it. Now take this staff in your hand. You'll use it to do a sign, to do signs. So Moses doesn't quite get off the hook. God gives him whom? Aaron, his brother. His Hebrew brother, back from that original family. And now Aaron's going to get to do the talking, but who pulls the strings? Moses. He'll say what you tell him to say. Later on, way down the line, we'll find out how that could have been a problem too. So he finds out they're being punished, the children of Israel being punished. They're being told to make bricks without straw. I can't imagine how it was hard enough with the straw. Yeah, you've seen the Ten Commandments. So there's a lot about that movie that's right on with giving you the examples. Look at chapter 5. Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh and say, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, let my people go, so they may hold a festival to me in the desert. Pharaoh said, who is the Lord, and why should I obey him to let Israel go? I don't know the Lord, and I'll not let Israel go. The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Now let us take a 3-day journey into the desert to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God, or he may strike us with plagues or with the sword. Sounds like they got a little warning there, huh? So the first time he lets them go, but they have to leave who in the city? They have to leave the children. Because Pharaoh figures if the kids are still here, they'll come back. They'll come back. Verse 10, the slave drivers and their underlings went out to the people with their new instructions, Pharaoh's orders. No more straw. Get your own straw wherever you can find it, and not one brick less to your daily work quota. The people scattered all over Egypt, scrabbling for straws. Complete your daily quota of bricks, the same number as when you were given straw. The Israel foremen, whom the slave drivers had appointed, were beaten and badgered. Why didn't you finish your quota of bricks yesterday, or the day before, and now again today? Get tired of this, so they go to the Pharaoh and ask why that's happening. And he just thinks they're lazy, tells them to move on. All else has failed, so now in verse 20, as they left Pharaoh, they found Moses and Aaron waiting to meet them. The foreman said to them, "May God see what you have done and judge you. You've made us stink before Pharaoh and his servants. You've put a weapon in his hand that's going to kill us." So Moses is standing there thinking, this is not the plan, God. This isn't what was going to happen. So instead of giving up, throwing up his hand and going back to Midian, what does he do? That next verse. He goes back to God. Goes back and talks to God. It's always the easy out to throw up your hands and quit. And if God's had you do it, you'll be in trouble if you do that. So they continue on talking, and things get worse and worse and worse. They start talking about their family tree. We're definitely not going to read through all those names. So we come to chapter 6, verse 28. Now when the Lord spoke to Moses in Egypt, he said to him, "I am the Lord. Tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, everything I tell you." But Moses said to the Lord, "Since I speak with faltering lips, why would Pharaoh listen to me?" He's going back to that out. I can't talk with. Was that outside?
I hope so.
I saw a flash.
Okay. Go Rainbows. And God told Moses,
I ain't going.
"What's that?
I ain't getting
Do
up.
you see me turn around?"
I'll stay right here.
I'm on Marie's window and she's still in
It
Christmas.
sounded like a
Firecracker.
transformer.
It was over the
Transformer or
transformer. I heard that the other night, about a week ago, here, but it was over in that direction. But this was over that way.
So let's get back to chapter 7. God told Moses, "Look at me and I'll make you as a god to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet. You're to speak everything I commanded you, and your brother Aaron will tell it to Pharaoh. Then he'll release the Israelites from this land. At the same time, I'm going to put Pharaoh back up and follow it up by filling Egypt with signs and wonders. Pharaoh is not going to listen to you, but I will have my way against Egypt and bring my soldiers, my people, the Israelites, from Egypt by mighty acts of judgment. The Egyptians will realize that I am God when I step in and take the Israelites out of their country." Moses and Aaron did exactly what God commanded. Moses was 80, Aaron 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. Find anything? Okay.
Oh, the car's still sitting there, so what the car
No
will
flat
be.
tires.
So here we have that next 40. Remember the 40 years thinking he was somebody when he was in Egypt? Now he's had 40 years wandering around with taking care of the sheep in Midian. Sometimes we think our lives are going to be forever, or we think they're not going to be for long. It's really interesting, this story of Moses. God used him in the way he needed to use him, when he needed to use him. So now God has said, "I'm going to show the Pharaoh something that's going to make him change his mind." And that's where we come to the plagues. And that's like through several chapters. Well, let's see if you already know these. The first thing that happens is waters turn to blood, the River Nile. Now, some of these shows will tell you that every so often the River Nile floods and red stuff gets in it, whatever. I think it was blood. And then the next thing that shows up in chapter 7, verse 25, and then 8:1, they're telling again, let them go. Tell Aaron. Verse 6, chapter 8, verse 6. So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the what? Frogs. Not just a few, not just a little bit, but frogs that covered the land. They showed this parking lot in Texas, I think it was, that this particular kind of bird just flooded into the parking lot. The parking lot, the cars were all covered in these birds. Sounds like a Hitchcock movie, but they were everywhere. So I was thinking about that. I was thinking about these frogs being everywhere. And what would be a problem besides just the frogs being there? What could add to that discomfort? They're noisy. So now you've got a whole countryside full of frogs all croaking and making all kinds of noise. And they're pretty upset. Huh?
And they poop.
I'm sure they do. Everybody does. So Pharaoh, chapter 8, verse 8, called in Moses and Aaron and said, "Pray to God to get rid of these frogs, or release people so they can make their sacrifices and worship God." Moses said to Pharaoh, "Certainly, set the time. When do you want the frogs out of here? Take away from your servants and people and out of your house. You'll be rid of the frogs except for those of the Nile." And Pharaoh says, "Make it tomorrow, like as quick as possible." Tomorrow is real. You'll realize there's no God like our God. So it goes on in verse 15. But when Pharaoh saw he had some breathing room, he got stubborn again and wouldn't listen to Moses and Aaron, just as God had said. Do we ever do that? Pharaoh's reaction? Get stubborn. And the King James, I think it says he hardened his heart. I think we do that with our prayer life sometimes. We'll be praying about something and we'll get sort of what we prayed about. We'll settle. It didn't work for Pharaoh, but it probably won't work for us. So the next thing is an infestation of, verse 16, God said to Moses, "Tell Aaron, take your staff and strike the dust. The dust will turn into gnats or bugs. Gnats all over the land." I can't think of anything more irritating than there just to be a gnat flying around, you know, and I think they have eyes all through their body because they'll move the minute you move. So now we've got gnats all over the area. Now what's the problem with that? It's just a few bugs, right? No. All the dust of the earth turned into gnats everywhere in Egypt. So now Pharaoh is trying to figure out a way to get around this. So he checks with his magicians. Can you make gnats show up? I get itchy just thinking about it. But they couldn't do that. This is God's doing, but Pharaoh was stubborn and wouldn't listen, just as God had said. Now we're on to the fourth. Swarms of flies. Now we're really getting nasty. Flies. You know how those flies are when it's like winter time and there'll be a fly that has been hanging around? And they're just everywhere. And you can't, the only way you can kill them is if they sit still long enough, you can just smush them. But here's flies everywhere. Now I've often wondered, were the gnats still there? Were the gnats still there? And if it is, then you got gnats everywhere and flies. That's getting pretty nasty. Verse 28. Pharaoh says, "All right, I'll release you to go and sacrifice to your God in the wilderness. Only don't go too far. Now pray for me." Moses said, "As soon as I leave here, I'll pray to God that tomorrow the flies will leave. Leave Pharaoh, his servants, his people. But don't play games with us and change your mind about releasing us to sacrifice to God." Moses left Pharaoh and prayed to God. God did what Moses asked, got rid of the flies. There wasn't a fly left, but Pharaoh became stubborn once more and wouldn't release the people. Okay, so far he's had to put up with the river turning to blood. He's had to put up with frogs. He's had to put up with gnats. He's had to put up with flies. Do you ever wonder why Pharaoh was so stubborn?
Because he was a man.
That's
I'm
right.
glad a man said that, not me. Why else? Why else would he not let them go? They're just going to go out in the wilderness to worship. I think by that time he knew the Egyptians were fed up. And there weren't just a few. It's been estimated, I think I read somewhere, it's over 1 million people that were in that group that left. So what happens if all these slaves leave Egypt?
You might have to do some work.
Yeah, all these grand buildings and things or statues he was building, they would all stop. There wouldn't be anybody to cook or clean or any of that stuff too. So it's not just a minor inconvenience. It would change his whole life.
There would have been a loss of power.
Exactly. It's already a loss of power because he can't make the frogs, the blood, the gnats, the flies go away. And his magicians can't. So what's the next plague?
Death of livestock.
If you refuse to let them go and continue to hold them back, The hand of the Lord will bring a terrible plague on your livestock in the field, on your horses and donkeys and camels, and on your cattle and sheep and goats. But the Lord will make a distinction between the livestock of Egypt and that of Israel and that of Egypt, so that no animal belonging to the Israelites will die. Now you got a problem, because all your livestock is going to basically die, have this plague. Now, imagine Pharaoh standing on his porch looking out or whatever. He sees all his animals sick. And he looks over there at that little bitty bunch of cattle that the Israelites had, and they're just fine. They're just fine. You think that's going to help him change his mind? Nope. Nope. God set the time. Tomorrow God will do this. The next day God did it. All the livestock of Egypt died, but not one animal of the Israelites died. Pharaoh sent men to find out what had happened. There was none of the livestock of the Israelites had died, not one death. But Pharaoh stayed stubborn. He wouldn't release the people. I love the patience of Moses and Aaron in this. Can't you see them sitting around and going, what is it going to take? What's it going to take for him to give in? Well, you know, now he's attacked his livestock. Now he's going to go after Pharaoh himself. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, take a handful of soot from a furnace and have Moses toss it in the air in the presence of Pharaoh. It will become fine dust over the whole land, and festering boils will break out on men and animals throughout the land. I thought all the animals had died, but anyhow. So all these boils are going to pop out, even on Pharaoh. That's a whole lot worse than gnats and flies and frogs. So they threw this soot up in the air. Boils broke out. The magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils that were on them and on all the Egyptians. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. He would not listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had said. You ever had a boil? It's nasty. It hurts. And even if you get it taken care of, it still hurts. But imagine having those all over your body. And you can't get your friend to help you because he or she has boils all over their body. What's the next one? Hail. Now, you know enough about Egypt to know that it's a desert, pretty much a desert area. I don't think they see rain very often, and I surely don't think they see hail. I keep thinking about somebody I know that pronounces H-E-L-L that way. Lord told Moses, get up again, tell him let us go. I'll send the full force of my plagues against you and against your officials and your people, so you'll know there's no one like me in all the earth. For by now I could have stretched out my hand and struck you and your people with a plague that would have wiped you off the earth. Therefore, at this time tomorrow, I'll send the worst hailstorm that has ever fallen in Egypt from the day it was found until now. Give an order now to bring your livestock and everything you have in the field to a place of shelter, because the hail will fall on every man and animal that has not been brought in and is still out in the field, and they will die. I get the idea this isn't that little pinging hail, you know? It's kind of cute because it bounces off your porch and stuff. You've seen some of the hail balls they've shown that are like softballs. If it's going to be killing a lot of people and animals, it's going to be some pretty big hail. Surely this will really help Pharaoh, right? 27, the Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron. This time I have sinned. The Lord is in the right. I and my people are in the wrong. Pray to the Lord, for we've had enough thunder and hail. I'll let you go. You don't have to stay any longer. Moses replied, when I gone out of the city, I'll spread out my hands in prayer to the Lord. Thunder will stop and there will be no more hail, so you will know that the earth is the Lord's. But I know that you and your officials still do not fear the Lord our God. Talks about all the crops that were killed. Spreads out his hands. The hail stops. 34. When Pharaoh saw that the rain and hail and thunder had stopped, he sinned again. He and his officials hardened their hearts, so Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he would not let the Israelites go, just as the Lord had promised. I don't think I've ever been quite so not positively impressed, but noticing truly how stubborn Pharaoh was. Can you imagine what condition his country is in when all these things have happened and he's still saying, I won't let them go? Well, we've had all these other things, now we're going to have some locusts come.
Catherine, kind of reminds me when God does something for us and we're rejoicing that it's done, and then we forget about it, and then something else happens.
We get a prayer answered, and the next time something comes up, I don't know if God's going to help me with this or not. That's why it's good to have people around you who can say, you've been here before, and God got you through it. So the locusts come. Verse 7, chapter 10, the Pharaoh's officials said, how long will this man be a snare to us? Let the blankety blank people go. Would be my. So they may worship the Lord their God. Do you not realize that Egypt is in ruins? Go worship the Lord your God. But just who will be going? Verse 9, Moses said, we're taking young and old, sons and daughters, flocks and herds. This is our worship celebration of God. I'd rather send you off with God's blessing than let you go with your children. Look, you're up to no good. It's written all over your faces. Nothing doing. Just the men are going. Go ahead and worship God. That's what you want so badly. And they were thrown out of Pharaoh's presence, trying to make God's plans more suitable, more acceptable. Moses stretched out his staff over the land of Egypt, loosed the east wind, and blew all that day and night. By morning, the east wind had brought in the locusts. I just can't imagine. What do you call those things that make all that noise in the summer?
Cicadas.
Huh?
Cicadas.
Cicadas. Oh, I call them katydids. I don't know why. Cicadas. If you live somewhere where there's a lot of those, it can be very annoying. Again, imagine the whole country filled with them. I don't know why the people, the Egyptians themselves hadn't come up against Pharaoh. Not just his officials. Why haven't the people come and said, you gotta do something. You gotta do something. And they may have, but we don't get to know about that.
Bless you.
Chapter 10, verse 21, God said to Moses, stretch out your hand to the skies, like darkness descend on the land of Egypt, a darkness so dark you can touch it. Moses stretched out his hand to the skies, thick darkness descended on the land of Egypt for 3 days. Nobody could see anyone. 3 days, no one could see as much as moon, except for the Israelites that had light wherever they were living. Now, I'm telling you, I think if I were the Pharaoh, I'd really be getting upset now. First of all my animals died. Theirs lived. We all got boils, they didn't get any. And then when I think about how the Egyptians had light wherever they lived, can you picture this so dark that you can't see your hand in front of your face? You've been out in the country before, you know when it's that dark. But over here, everybody's living in the sunshine. Verse 25. Moses said, you must allow us to have sacrifices and burnt offerings to present to the Lord our God. Our livestock too must go with us, not a hoof to be left behind. We have to use some of them in worshiping the Lord our God, and until we get there, we will not know what we are to use for worship to the Lord. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he was not willing to let them go. Pharaoh said to Moses, get out of my sight. Make sure you do not appear before me again. The day you see my face, you'll die. Just as you said, Moses replied, I'll never appear before you again. I can see Moses just shrugging and saying, okay, won't be seeing me anymore. And under his breath going, God's always had up with you now. And you know what the last plague was, right? Death on the firstborn. Firstborn. But they got to get ready because it's really coming to a head now. Look at chapter 11. I'm going to hit Pharaoh in Egypt one final time, and then he'll let you go. When he releases you, that you may be the end. That will be the end of Egypt for you. he won't be able to get rid of you fast enough. So he tells them to start gathering up things, getting things together that they need. At midnight, I'll go through Egypt, and every firstborn child of Egypt will die. From the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sits on his throne, to the firstborn of the slave girl working at her handmill. Also the firstborn of all animals. Widespread wailing will erupt from all over the country, lament such as never been heard. But against the Israelites, man, woman, or animal, so that you will know. There won't be so much as a dog's bark, so you'll know that God made clear distinction between Egypt and Israel. Now you have this death angel, if you will, it's going to come through to kill these firstborn. Again, has everybody seen the Ten Commandments, the movie The Ten Commandments? First time I saw it, we were at camp, and they let us walk down from the camp to this drive-in theater down off Lebanon in Marion. And we sat out on the ground at night with our blankets and our pillows to watch this movie on a big drive-in screen. So when it gets to this point, there's this really creepy green ghost that weaves in and out. I mean, it was scary. Weaves in and out and stops at certain houses. But it didn't stop at the Egyptians' houses. I mean, the Israelites' houses. Why? Why did it stop? He told them to take the blood and put it on the mat, the lintels, the edges of the door. And the death angel would not come in there. Do I understand how that happened? Do I think that would have been the best thing to do? No, but I didn't get to write the story. So this happens. It's really sad when you see the movie or when you think about it. The firstborn, because you know, it's in any culture, the firstborn is always extra special. And especially if you're the firstborn of Pharaoh, you're extra special because when he dies, you get to be the next Pharaoh. And this is where the Passover comes in. You can read that sometime. They have to have a certain meal, and they have to have the bread that's not with yeast because they have to hurry up and do it. Something that we sort of reenact every Sunday, Jesus' rendition of it. Chapter 12, verse 31. During the night, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Up, lead my people, you and the Israelites, go worship the God as you've requested. Take your flocks and herds as you've said. Go and also bless me." The Egyptians urged the people to hurry and leave their country, for otherwise we will all die. So the people took their dough before the yeast was added and carried it on their shoulders in kneading troughs wrapped in clothing. The Israelites did as Moses instructed and asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold and for clothing. The Lord made the Egyptians favorably disposed toward the people, and they gave them what they asked for. So they plundered the Egyptians. Okay, you've lived through all this, and they're finally going to leave, and they say, "Can you help us out with some stuff?" You know, it's like I've always said, if I were somewhere and they wanted to rob me, all they didn't want Rudy, I'd say, "Here's my money, here's my debit card, can I write you a check?" They're giving them everything. And if we get all into the story later, when they start setting up the tabernacle, guess what they're going to need? These gold things, these silver things, to create what God has asked them to do. So God already knew what they needed as they were going. They celebrated the first Passover. Now, I'm going to leave the rest of these blanks for you all to fill in before next week. You have a chance to read on through this, and it's really fascinating stories. Fascinating stories. And after all this miracle, they still have lots of problems going through the promised land. They gripe, they complain, they rebel. Haven't seen all these miracles. Why would they do that? Because they're people, just like you and me. And no matter how good God's been to us, there are going to be those times when you go, "I am just sick and tired of this. I have to get up one more Sunday morning and go to church. I have to sit through Bible study one more time. If I have to give that offering one more time." So we haven't changed all that much. I hope you'll especially look at chapter 15, where there's a song that Moses and Miriam sing, which is one of the few times women get credit for all that. And then after we finish finish this sheet next week, we'll talk about some of the lessons we have learned, or that we can learn from this story of Moses. Anything else? I know y'all want to get home and watch the,
I'm recording it.
What are we watching?
Trump's State of the
Oh,
Union.
I wonder how I missed that.
Loving God, we thank you that you show us in these people that we all have choices. We all have choices to follow you and to be obedient and to enjoy it. Or we have the choice to be grumpy and be not in your will. Give us the courage to trust you and to learn from other people so we don't have to learn it for ourselves. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.